infinite and eternal sea of completely undifferentiated consciousness. And that it is the source of the material universe, which it enfolded into being out of consciousness. This is the classic seventh paradigm theistic worldview. And then there's the eighth paradigm worldview, which is the post-contact worldview, when we have actually confirmed and established contact with an extraterrestrial civilization and learn how to travel to the stars and how to travel to other galaxies, that this is going to be the worldview that we're opening onto, at which point our human species will take the next full step in evolution. And that we will, in fact, evolve from Homo sapien to Homo divinus. And that we will actually be as much unlike Homo sapiens at that point as we are now from Homo erectus. So that's what's in the offing right now. And so you can see how important this issue of contact with an extraterrestrial civilization is, because it offers to bring us beyond the highest paradigm that we have now, or worldview, which is our classic theistic worldview, even well beyond the mere quantum worldview that we're sort of coming onto linearly right now. So it's extraordinarily important that we take great care in husbanding and midwifing this worldview. And that's really what we're here for. I mean, the fact is that we're not here just to look for, knocking on the side of a UFO or to, take pictures of a UFO. We're here because of that extraordinarily high calling that we all hear of looking toward the ultimate worldview of our human family, because it will be the closing of the octave of the worldviews to which we have access in our present incarnation as Homo sapien. It will be the opportunity we have then to make an entire octave jump into the next octave of being, at which point we will function at the lowest manifestation of the worldview of the next octave of being. And that's what we're doing. So you can see that it's important to understand that, in my opinion, what's happened is because of the contacts that began, as we all know, the principal contacts, setting aside the sporadic contacts that have gone on down through the centuries that we all are quite aware of, that after the explosion of the first nuclear bomb, the first atomic bomb, at White Sands in 1945, even prior to the explosions in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, that we began to have these contacts from these vehicles that would manifest, and they were all around White Sands, and they were all around New Mexico, and they were searching around and following the V2 rocket experiments and all the things that were going on. It becomes quite evident that what happened is, in my judgment, that the extraterrestrial civilization realized that we had crossed into a point where we were threatening to terminate the entire evolution of our human family. We had touched into the technology that was going to be our own source of self-destruction. And I raise that because we now know that it was on the night of October 28th of 1962 when, but for the decision of one specific individual, we would have, in fact, totally annihilated ourselves, because the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States government had voted to go to nuclear first strike against the Soviet Union. And if that simple flick of the wrist had happened from John Kennedy and said, launch, we would all be gone. And we would not be here talking about this. So we've overcome that particular moment of dire threat. But that was the moment of dire threat that basically instigated the major bout of contacts that we began having with the extraterrestrial beings. And so what's happening now, that we have this entire set of questions that are in front of us, is, well, what happened there when they reached out to us to actually attempt to keep this from happening? We know of the contacts. You remember back in 1967, the contacts up at the Nike Zeus missile sites up in Montana, where the UFOs came and they shut down all 10 Nike Zeus missile sites in 2 different Nike Zeus missile bases there. So they're perfectly capable of shutting down these particular devices. We know that now. So the question is well, what are the beings up to? What are they doing? What kind of contact have they had with our United States government? What kind of contact have they had with the Soviet Union? And I've had the privilege of chairing the strategic initiative to identify the new post-Cold War paradigm, working with President Gorbachev at the State of the World Forum, which Colonel Ware touched upon. So I've had the opportunity to sit down with the presidents of 90 different foreign countries and to talk with them about this issue of the UFO stuff and how important they thought it was. It was the first conversation I ever had with Gorbachev when I got an opportunity to sit down with him. And he referred me directly to his foreign minister, who put me in touch with the man who told me all about the contacts and stuff that they'd had in the Soviet Union with these beings. And so that I think that this is an extraordinarily important issue. It is, as I've said before, I think it's the most important single public policy issue confronting our human family today, because it is filled with promise. It is filled with the potential of opening onto an entire new world, the entire next step in our biological evolution as a species. But it's important to remember how terrified the guardians of the present worldview are by the threat of this. There's an old Sufi saying that when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets. And this is what I believe happened when this extraordinary opportunity presented itself of the contact with an extraterrestrial civilization, because of our nation state, a comparatively primitive organizing mechanism to begin with. But our nation state, seeing itself in fundamental dialectical conflict with the Soviet Union, perceived this as simply two things. One, an opportunity to get a great advantage in having a new weapon system to be able to defeat the Soviet Union. And secondly, perceived these beings as a potential threat. They perceived them as the ultimate other. And that's the fundamental function of the second paradigm dialectical worldview, is you encounter a different being and you perceive them as a threat, as it's a projection of the ultimate other onto them. And so that I think both things happened with regard to the major American military complex. They perceived these beings as an ultimate threat. They invaded our airspace. We had no capacity to counter them. So I believe that that the leaders of the American government at that time began to try to seize these vehicles. As you know, they began to try to shoot them down with radar beams, and they tried to develop special weapon systems to shoot these vehicles down, to capture them, to try to get at the technology, to understand the technology so we could develop a new weapon system with which to become the all-powerful source of power on the planet. And that's the sinful motive that basically has been driving the leaders of our nation state since the